Hello, music lovers. Thank you so much for dropping by. I thought I would go over the set list that Def Leppard has chosen for their new tour that just got kicked off last night in Hartford, Connecticut. They're on the road this summer with Journey doing a co-headliner. And so I've got another video coming up for the Journey set that'll be coming up later. But, just thought I'd go over the set list that Leopard's playing. You pretty much know what to expect with these guys. They've got about 2.5 albums maybe of really solid stuff, and then everything outside of that is hit and miss. And they start the show with Rocket from the Hysteria album, which is one of those albums that they're going to play a lot of shit off of it, and they should, because that's where a lot of their best stuff is. And so that's an album that I remember when it came out in the summer of '87. It was just a feast for the ears. A friend of mine was telling me how he had heard that it was the future of rock and how it was going to be made and everything. And I was thinking, really? And I listened to it, and it was just like ear candy, but in a good way. Robert Mutt Lange was the producer who had already worked with AC/DC, and he worked with Foreigner on Foreigner 4. I mean, this guy knows how to make hit albums, and he went on to work, I think, with Bryan Adams, and of course, The Cars, and Shania Twain. Look what he did with her, married her. And you don't hear a lot about him. He's a mysterious character, Robert Mutt Lange. You don't find very many interviews with him. He's not a very public, high-profile person for as much damage as he's done, and I mean that in a good way, in the '80s and '90s. They do Animal next. That's from the Hysteria album. Great track there. Foolin from Pyromania, When Love and Hate Collide. I remember that song. Yeah, I mean that was from the '90s. I think that was from the Vault album. That's one of those songs that I really didn't care much for. It was outside of the Robert Mutt Lange production zone, which that's the stuff that I really, really like. I mean, he produced, I think he produced High and Dry, as well as Pyromania and then Hysteria, and then that's pretty much it. And he may have written with them a little bit later on, but that's where it's really, really at. And, when you look at some of the stuff that they did in the '90s, it just didn't have the same flair. You could hear that they were going for it, like with this song. But it never, to me, it just wasn't really, it didn't really do it. And then Let's Get Rocked comes after that. That's another song that I didn't really care about when it first came out. It had a pretty slick video, kind of like the Money for Nothing video that Dire Straits did, but that same kind of an animation. I never really cared for that song. That sounds like something they were trying to reach for the Robert Lange sound, but to me it just never really worked. Armageddon It's after that. Rock On, which is the David Essex cover. They do that, and then they do Two Steps Behind, which, in spite of the fact that the '90s wasn't very, very kind to them. I was actually a DJ on the radio in these days, the early '90s, and it was very, very tough getting them on the radio. The programmers did not want to put them on. They were not seen as cool now. The '80s, the hair bands and all that kind of ruined it for '80s rock. I mean, Metallica, they were able to weather the whole '80s thing. Def Leppard had more of a struggle. They were more built around the MTV Image thing, whereas Metallica wasn't. They already had a really big cult following. Def Leppard blew up because of their image and because of the videos, and so when that kind of thing went out of style, it was hard for them to appeal to the grunge crowd. They had to kind of find their own, they had to get those fans back from the '80s and keep them hooked. And they kept putting albums out, and they kept themselves out there. They did not break up, and they didn't go away and have like a reunion tour. They've always been there. And the stuff that they've done hasn't been all that bad. It's just that there's such a big shadow that they're under from their stuff from the '80s. Anyway, they do Man Enough. That was an album that came out recently. That was kind of a groovy kind of song. I mean, like I said, it wasn't bad, but I didn't really care for it. Love Bites from the Hysteria album, one of the, I think, 7 singles that came from that album. Bringing On the Heartbreak from High and Dry. Also Switch 625. Now, that's a deep cut there. That is a instrumental that Steve Clark wrote, the one that passed away. That's a really cool early rocker. That should be great live. Hysteria comes after that. Pour Some Sugar on Me. Of course, you know, that song there is, you know, what more can I say? I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's kind of like a Don't Stop Believing kind of thing where it's like I've heard it a million times. I don't want to hear it again. And so that's how they end the show. And then they come back for Rock of Ages and Photograph. So there you go. I'd say a very solid set from the guys. I would see that. I even thought about maybe showing up and going to see one of these shows. We'll see. But Def Leppard, they had to weather a lot of shit. They had to get through the death of a guitar player. Their drummer lost an arm. And then their decade, the 80s, once that went away, the 90s didn't start off with a kiss. Okay? They had to earn everything. And so you can say what you want about them, but they have definitely paid their dues time after time. All right, so what do you think about this set list? Would you go see them? Let me know if you've already got tickets, if you're planning to go. If you give the set list a thumbs up, give the video a thumbs up too. Be sure to subscribe. I will have the Journey set list coming up in just a little bit, and I'll talk to you later.